This episode is brought to you by TradeZero and Lupton Capital.
Joe Lupton is a paid marketing partner of TradeZero and may receive compensation for introducing customers to TradeZero. This video represents only the views and opinions of Joe Lupton. TradeZero does not endorse the content of this video.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Investing with the Whales podcast. My name is Jonah Lupton. Special guest today, we got Libor Michalek, the president of Affirm. Libor, how are you?
Good, Jonah. How are you?
I am doing great.
Excellent.
So, for anyone that's not familiar, Affirm is one of the largest buy now, pay later companies out there. They've done partnerships with some of the largest U.S. e-commerce platforms like Amazon and Shopify. We're going to talk about that. We're going to go into their underwriting process, some of the advantages they have over their competitors, maybe just buy now, pay later as an industry and kind of where it started and how Affirm came about. So let's start there. First of all, how long have you been with the firm? And I know Max is the founder. He was one of the PayPal guys. So maybe you can talk to us about how and why he started this company, and then when you joined.
I joined 8 years ago, shortly after it was started. I've known Max for quite a while before that, worked with him previously. And so when he told me what he was thinking about the idea of creating a company that is focused on consumer finance, on offering credit to customers that is aligned with the interest of the customer, where when the customer does well, when they get the expected and the wanted, that the company does well, and that when we get it wrong and the customer is not able to repay, we share in the negative outcomes. And so really aligning those interests of a financial institution and its customers was really compelling for me, obviously for him as well. And that really sparked, I think, all of ours interest in building a better mousetrap, a better credit product.
So talk to us, what exactly is buy now, pay later?
It's at this point become a pretty broad term. It generally means making a purchase on some form of credit where what you're purchasing, you pay a portion of it either immediately or over time. So really just spreading it out, those repayments over time.
What are the typical terms? I mean, how many does it depend on the size of the purchase?
It depends on to a large extent on the provider. The sort of the table stakes version of this that a lot of companies have is 0% over 6 weeks, effectively 4 payments. That's kind of the base case for smaller purchases. And then it goes from there, 0% interest bearing over, multiple payment cycles, anything from that 6-week cycle all the way out to, larger purchases, 4 years, so 48 monthly payments, even further. It really depends on the provider, as well as, what is the merchant selling, and what does the consumer need, as well as what can they afford.
So over the last 2 or 3 months, I've been getting into DJing and music production. So I've had to buy all sorts of equipment, and I've bought different stuff from probably 4 or 5 different websites. Every single one of them now has buy now, pay later as an option. 3 or 4 years ago, that obviously wasn't the case. I mean, this has really, really caught on. And some of the stats, when I did my deep dive write-up on Affirm, one of the stats that came from RBC that kind of stuck out, and I'll just read it off so I get the numbers right. Affirm competes in the massive there you go. RBC Capital Markets estimates these buy now, pay later products increase retail conversion rates by 20 to 30% and lift the average ticket size by 30 to 50%. So, I mean, those are massive numbers when you're talking e-commerce.
Yeah. I mean, those are great numbers. That's really obviously why the merchants are picking these products, embedding them in their checkout. The numbers are very specific to the provider because at the end of the day, those numbers come from how many people are you able to approve for what amounts, and that is really dependent on the quality of the underwriting that the institution is doing. It also depends on the size of the purchase. So the longer terms, larger purchases, the wider range of terms and purchases that you're able to provide the merchant, the more customer demand you're able to capture. And also it depends on having a clear product for the consumer. The consumers, are opting into these purchases because they have the clarity and the peace of mind on this thing that I'm going to buy, this is how much it's actually going to cost me over the next, however long it's going to take to pay for it. Knowing that upfront as a part of the purchase is really what creates the confidence that I can afford it or not, right? Sometimes, the decision is I can't afford it. And that's really, I think, where the importance of what we're providing, that level of clarity and confidence, really resonates with consumers.
So talk to us about underwriting. What is it based on? Is it FICO scores and income and, other levels of debt, payment experience, all of that? Or does it go even deeper than that?
It goes deeper. I mean, it is primarily rooted in what the credit bureaus are able to provide on the customers. There's also alternative data sources about a customer's finances. It is all financial data. But then once the customer is, in our case, an Affirm customer, our underwriting goes much deeper into the customer's ability to repay, how timely they are in repayments, how their finances are changing over time. All of those things get factored into underwriting. And there's also the decisions we make as a result of our credit scoring. It is not just a simple yes or no answer. It is the amounts, the monthly obligations, whether to take a down payment as an early signal of intent to repay. All of these things become really important signals and counter signals of, do we think this person is good for it? Because if we don't think they're good for it, we're not going to lend it out to them, because there's no way for us to get it back. There's no late fees. There's no fees beyond what is stated up front. And so if we can't make a good transaction, if we don't believe in the customer based on what we're telling them it's going to cost, then we're out the money. And so that's not good for us, and it's not good for the customer.
Do you guys have a cap on how much someone can use Affirm for in terms of the size of a purchase?
We do, both in terms of the aggregate number of across purchases as well as the largest single purchase. It's really dependent on the consumer, and there's some dependence on the merchant and how they're to the degree to which the merchant is actually willing to subsidize some of the risk.
Gotcha. And I mean, how far could someone spread out payments? I mean, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or even longer on bigger ones?
We definitely out to 60 months, 48 months.
Oh, okay.
So we go out pretty far. Yeah.
Okay. Because the big DJ set that I want is, $12,000. I mean, I started with a $2,000 one, but if I really get into this DJ thing, I'm talking a $12,000 purchase, and I would rather finance that over a few years than pay it out of pocket all at once.
Yeah. It really depends on the merchant and the purchase, as you're saying. Though we do have it is heavily weighted towards shorter terms, just the nature of the products and the amount of transactions. That actually helps us with our both our underwriting, but also the management of the aggregate capital program, because the transactions turn over so fast. So the weighted average is more like 4.5 months, even though we can go out to pretty long terms for those larger purchases.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Do you guys report to the credit bureaus yet?
We do on the larger purchases. In the longer terms, there isn't a standard today for the really short-term small purchases. So we are engaged with the credit bureaus to work out through a standard. We think it's good for the industry and especially good for the consumers. So we're all in on making that happen. We're just working with the bureaus to figure out what the standard should be.
Now, the credit card industry is, parts of it are probably a little sleazy and take advantage of people, and they get interest rates bumped up when they miss one payment. There's a lot of knocks. I'm sure you probably have a long list as well, but it's a massive industry. Trillions of dollars that are getting, put on credit cards every year. And I think the outstanding credit card balance might have hit an all-time record recently. Yeah. So how is buy now, pay later different from the credit card industry, and how are you guys better or want to be better?
Yeah. I guess the part I'll disagree with you on that is that I think that's actually the credit card industry is fundamentally flawed. The consumers get charged when the unwanted or undesirable or unexpected happen. They sell convenience and ubiquity, and they give you unexpected interest and debt. The act of revolving, where you're late on a payment, or even if it's going to take you multiple months to pay it back, really starts this revolving clock where Anything else you put on the credit card, everything you buy until you've paid that entire credit card down is going to be accruing interest. You don't know how much interest in terms of dollars you're going to pay until you're at the end. We think that's like fundamentally backwards and broken. Our entire model is premised on, you know how much it's going to cost you all in ahead of time. There's no late fees at Affirm. There's no additional accrual besides what we quoted you at the very beginning, even if you drag it out longer. You will never pay more for that purchase than what we quoted at the beginning. That is, I think, a differentiator for Affirm relative to credit cards, but also relative to its competitors. At the end of the day, from our perspective, consumers need access to credit. There are things that make sense when you're buying them to have them sooner versus a year or 2 years from now. A couch, a suit, whatever it may be. As long as the customer knows exactly how much that is going to cost them extra to have it today versus later. As you said, it's a massive industry. Clearly, there's demand for credit. Some of that, I think, is unwanted credit, purchases that people are making that they'd prefer not to have on credit. But the ubiquity and convenience of the product encourages them to be paying interest on things they really shouldn't or don't want to. That is what we're here to fix.
Talk to us about your competitors. I mean, I know you guys are one of the biggest, and then there's Klarna and there's Afterpay. Afterpay was acquired by Square for 30 billion, 35 billion. I forget the exact number. How closely do you guys compete with them in the US? Because I think Affirm is mostly just US, right?
Yep. Primarily US, Canada today. Yep. We certainly run into them at different merchants. Afterpay is heavily focused on the fast fashion vertical. Lots of small repeat purchases. They only do very short-term, 6-week those small loans, and focus on turnover and repeat. We do run into them in terms of when we talk to merchants, but not as frequently. Klarna is another one, really focused on trying to enter the US market from their foothold in Europe, doing it with some aggressive pricing at the merchant level, but near as we can tell, not quite as robust at underwriting and managing risk and losses.
How do you guys make money?
Two ways, interest from the consumer and merchant fees. That's
okay. Which one do you make more money on?
At a merchant perspective level, it varies quite a bit. Obviously, we have merchants that have 0% programs, so there's no interest, and it's all coming from the merchant.
Gotcha.
And then balance all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum. Blended, it's not quite 50-50, but it's not far off.
And the reason the merchants are willing to pay you a fee is because of those stats I just rattled off from RBC that, increases frequency and ticket size.
Yeah. And we can create bespoke programs for them where they're able to subsidize more risk or larger cards or all kinds of levers that we provide to them, where their ability to contribute creates even more lift. And that's very attractive for them.
Talk to us about the partnerships, because I do think last year, investors were pretty excited when you guys announced the deals with Shopify and Amazon. And we're not going to go into exclusivity because it gets complicated. And but just talk to us about, when did those discussions start, and how long did they take, and how big of a deal is this for Affirm going forward?
We have 5 of the 10 largest retailers. We're obviously very excited to work with those partners, Amazon and Shopify included. Those are long conversations leading up to the launch of those programs, and continue to be really robust engagements even after, where we continue, especially at their scale, to optimize the programs, work with them. To really make sure it's delivering as much as it can be. And from our perspective, making sure that their customers understand what's being offered and have as clear of a picture as possible. We see it as the early days of scaling those up. We continue to see growth within those in terms of growth of Affirm's penetration into their customer base that is greater than the rate at which they themselves are growing. And so we see that as really positive signs.
Amazon has, I mean, Shopify has hundreds of thousands, actually by now it's probably millions of stores or merchants. I assume they opt in to using Affirm, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what happens if, say I go to, I'm trying to think, no, I mean, it's crazy how many Shopify websites I use. I mean, like Noble, where I buy a lot of my gym sneakers. You go to the website and you right click and you go through some of the code or whatever it is, and you can see how many are Shopify stores, and it's wild.
Yeah.
But what happens if I spend, $500 on the Noble website, and I don't even know if buy now, pay later is an option. I haven't checked, but let's say I stop making payments, my card gets declined or whatever. How do you guys take all of that credit risk yourselves off your own balance sheet?
So the capital program is pretty robust. Some of it's on balance sheet, some of it is off balance sheet. But we do manage the risk and take the risk primarily ourselves. It basically is the crux of our underwriting. What are our delinquency curves look like? What are our charge-off rates look like? How is that balance across balance sheet, off balance sheet, all of that. Yeah, it's a pretty robust program.
I don't know if you're able to get into, how granular this might be, but how do delinquencies look now versus 6 months ago, 12 months ago? And do you think they're going to get better or worse if we go into a mild recession?
That's an interesting question. From our perspective, delinquencies are something we set targets for and control to versus have happened to us. So today, our delinquencies are actually stronger than our 2019 pre-pandemic delinquencies were. That was a conscious choice in terms of preparation for the potential for challenging times. So while we see stress on the consumer, we manage the program in terms of how much we will extend over what periods of times to whom to manage to a specific outcome. And so we're really focused on managing to the outcome versus allowing it to happen to us. As I was saying, we're performing better than we were in 2019 right now on delinquencies. That has a lot to do with our anticipation that there's potential for more stress in our future in 23, especially as Fed continues to raise rates. Obviously trying to cool down the employment market, which obviously directly impacts people's ability to repay. But that's something we are anticipating and feel that we're pretty strongly prepared for.
Have you noticed customers using buy now, pay later for smaller purchases?
We certainly see customers using buy now, pay later more frequently to increase purchasing power as inflation has hit, as fuel prices and food prices have gone up. When they're thinking about considered purchases, larger purchases, whether those larger purchases are huge grocery, all at once, or other items, that's when they're choosing buy now, pay later to stretch their dollars further.
So I think the most exciting thing that you guys are working on right now that I definitely want to talk about is the Debit Plus card. So talk to us about what that program is going to be or what that product is going to be and how you expect customers to be using it.
The idea is really to take what we kind of described in the product we provide at checkout with all of these merchants and provide it in the form of a card where you have the ability to decide whether the purchase you're going to make on this card is going to be a BNPL transaction, something you're going to pay over time, and with an understanding of how much that's going to cost before you make the swipe, or whether you want the swipe to go directly through to your bank account and settle like if it were a normal debit card. And so it gives you really this app-controlled experience where you decide the configuration of the card for every single swipe with obviously intelligent defaults.
So how would it work? Like, let's say I go to the grocery store and I, rack up $150 of groceries. Do I get a pop-up on the screen? Do I get a pop-up on my phone? Or do I do it when I leave the store?
If you just run it without using the phone, it'll depend on what your defaults are set to.
Okay.
You can decide ahead of time if it's like, oh, this is going to be this is going to be a bigger purchase. I want to know what it would cost me to split it over time, say over 3 months or 6 weeks or 6 months. You pop that into the app. It'll tell you. You decide if that's what you want to happen or if you want it to go straight through to your bank account. So it really gives customers that control that they're craving around being able to decide on a per purchase basis, what do I really want to happen in terms of what am I paying for?
Now, I believe you guys are still kind of beta testing the Debit Plus card with Affirm employees. Is that right?
It's more than Affirm employees. I think at this point we have about 50,000 people enrolled in the beta. But we are still testing it, and really primarily the app and how to make what I just described as intuitive and unobtrusive as possible for customers to use on a day-to-day basis.
When would you expect a full rollout?
I'm not ready to announce a rollout.
You think in 2023?
I'm not ready to announce a rollout. The fine marketing team will figure that out.
How big of a product do you think that's going to be for Affirm? I mean, is that a needle mover?
I believe so. Yeah. I certainly, that's the intent behind it. Today, we have more than 14 million active annual users at Affirm. We think the product is applicable to a pretty wide swath of them.
Because right now, how would someone do a POS, a point of sale purchase, right? I mean, walk into a Walmart store, it's hard to do buy now, pay later at checkout, right?
So Walmart, we have actually a custom in-store integration where you do go into the app and you type in exactly how much you're looking to spend. You get to the terms ahead of time. So again, upfront what it's going to cost you. You select it. It actually produces a gift card code, a scannable code that you can then scan at the checkout. So that works today. For other people, we have it as a one-time credit card number that you can get, either card not present or put it into your wallet. Okay. That works in store, but we do think that the physical card is going to be much more robust for in store. Okay.
Before we wrap up here, anything that we skipped over that you want to make sure you get a chance to talk about?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. I think the most important sort of aspect from my perspective is the differentiation, both with the credit card companies in terms of closed end, Affirm providing closed end credit where you know how much it's going to cost you up front versus revolving debt that ultimately once you get into it, it's common to struggle to get out of it. $6,000 on average per American consumer. And I also think it's important thing to mention the differentiation with the other BNPL providers, both in terms of our ability to underwrite more users, larger purchases, longer repayment, as well as the practice of aligning the interests of the company with the interests of the consumer. So no late fees, no gimmicks, only exactly what we say when you're making the purchase is what you're going to be charged, no matter what happens.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Wish you guys the best of luck and happy holidays to you and your team.
Thank you, Jonah. Same to you.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Please subscribe to Jonah Lupton's different investment services. The first one is Substack. The URL is substack.luptoncapital.com. The second one is StockTwits. The URL is stocktwits.luptoncapital.com. And the third one is for Seeking Alpha. The URL is seekingalpha.luptoncapital.com. And you can see all of those links if you just go to the Lupton Capital website at luptoncapital.com.